So a lot of people are upsizing from four-wheel drive utes like Rangers and Hiluxes, and they're looking at bigger four-wheel drive trucks like this Fuso Canter and the Isuzu NPS. So I'm here today with Brett from Australian Adventure Vehicles, and we're going to talk about the differences between these two vehicles to help you make an informed buying decision. So these two vehicles are fairly similar. They're both Japanese four-wheel drive trucks, which have a four-wheel drive capability, but really for extra traction as opposed to off-road capability, but AAV do modify them for off-road capability. So if they're that similar, Brett, what would you say are the main differences? I'm coming to you as a customer. Which one do I buy? What do you tell me?
It really depends what you're going to be using it for, Robert. If it's to travel around Australia, particularly with a van, and we're finding a lot of people are actually doing that with 3.5 ton to 4 ton vans, the Isuzu is certainly the way to go. Being it's a more powerful unit, it has a far better exhaust brake, and it will handle the task really well. If you're towing around, or if you're not towing, sorry, if you're driving just the truck itself, and it's going to be around that 6 ton mark, the Fuso is certainly the way to go. You do have a fuel economy advantage of around about 1 litre per 100k. It is also slightly better off-road. You've got more chassis flex, and you do have the drop chassis. So it enables, particularly in a dual cab, for the tray to be positioned slightly lower.
Now, size-wise, the Canter is a slightly smaller vehicle than the Isuzu, but this one's actually a lot taller. So, Brett, what's going on with this particular vehicle?
So these ones here, they're both sitting on the same size rubber. This one has been fitted with our parabolic set of suspension, so it's slightly better off-road, parabolics in the front end, where the Isuzu has been fitted with a multi-leaf. Yeah. So that means we've got about a 1-inch lift on this one and about a 4-inch lift on this one here.
So from a tyre and wheel perspective, Brett, what are the options?
There certainly are a few different options, and again it depends on the vehicle and also the weight you're running. With the Fuso, probably the best selling is the Hankook. They're a 129 load rating on a 37-inch. With the Isuzu, the Gladiators or something similar, running a 135. So that's really good for up to about 7 ton. If we're looking at more than 7 ton, or certainly towing, we go to a 19-inch rim, which is about the equivalent of a 35.
Okay, and both of them are part-time four-wheel drive with manual locking hubs, as you can see here and here. But notice that the Canter here has a drop chassis, whereas in the Isuzu those chassis rails are flat. What's going on there, and what are the pros and the cons of the two chassis designs?
Certainly. The straight chassis is certainly a stronger way to do things, particularly when we're going up to the higher weight. As they roll out of factory, the Fuso is sitting at 6.5 ton, where the Isuzu is 7.5, so we do have that difference there. The big advantage with the Fuso is because it is a drop chassis, it means particularly on a dual cab, where the cab ends approximately there, your tray can be mounted a lot lower. When we're doing our kinetic subframe kits, this tray will still be lower because we'll actually run the kinetic subframe there, and the tanks will start somewhere here on the system, where on the Isuzu we have to build above the chassis line. That's the big difference.
All right, so that's the structural differences. From a consumer perspective, what would make a buyer prefer one over the other?
I guess it really depends on if you're using it for work or play and what you're going to be doing with it. If you're loading and unloading in and out of the tray, the lower tray is going to be less stress on your body. You're not lifting items as high. If you're putting a lot of weight in the tray, the Isuzu, because you've got the higher GVM, it's going to have that advantage there.
Right, so let's talk fuel consumption. I know the Fuso's got a 100-litre fuel tank, and the fuel consumption's fractionally better on it, whereas the Isuzu comes with a 140-litre fuel tank. Talk to us a bit more about the fuel tank options here.
The options are pretty well endless. With the Isuzu on this one here, we have fitted a secondary 140 fuel tank.
So this is the secondary?
That's the secondary.
And that's the standard?
That's correct.
Okay.
So that operates through a Pollock valve, so it's a simple one-press button, and your gauge will change automatically in the truck, as well as the tank where it draws from and the return fuel lines. On top of that, we then fit our kinetic subframes, which really, this truck will end up rolling out with over 500 litres of fuel. So both can take possibly more fuel than you'll ever need.
Okay, all right, so basically load as much fuel as you want, but if you weren't going to do that, then the Isuzu has 40 extra litres standard.
That's correct.
And even though it's slightly greater fuel consumption, what do you say, about a litre per 100?
It's about a litre per 100 kilometres.
Yeah, so that's your trade-off there. Now, there's also a trade-off to be made between the amount of fuel you carry and the amount of water you carry.
It's correct. The Isuzu will carry a little bit more water, but we're only talking about 40 litres extra. They're around about 230 litres versus 260 litres.
So let's talk off-road capability now. So Brett, from a pure off-road capability perspective, which is best, the Isuzu or the Fuso, and what are the pros and cons?
The main difference is starting off with the weight of the vehicle. The Fuso is a lighter vehicle, so that will give you a slightly better off-road ability, and also the chassis does flex significantly more than the Isuzu. So that, in combination with the weight, will give you a better off-road ability. Everything else is very well protected on both vehicles. I guess ground clearance wise, the Fuso is a little bit better. It wouldn't be by much though, simply because the running gear is a little bit lighter as well.
Okay, and you've got front and rear cross-axle differential locks for both vehicles?
That's correct. The Fuso and Isuzu both, we fit the Harab e-locker.
Yep.
On the rear, both come out standard with a very good LSD.
Okay, but is there a locker for the rear as well?
No, it's only just an LSD in both
Okay,
both vehicles.
So for maximum off-road, you go for the front locker and you just have the standard rear LSD?
That's correct.
So let's talk about electrics. We've got two batteries here. Are the electrics the same between the Fuso and the Isuzu?
There is actually a fair bit of difference. Now the Fuso, although it comes with the two batteries and there's a little bit of confusion there, it is only running a 12-volt system. So it's your typical car system, very easy to deal with, very easy to get accessories for. With the Isuzu, it does run a 24-volt system. So if you are combining it with a 12-volt system, you do have to be aware of that.
Okay, so for an Isuzu, what would you do would you convert it over to 12 volt, or would you just run the main thing on 24 and then have a separate 12 volt system, or what?
Look, there's several different ways to do it. My recommendation, if you can use 24 volt appliances, certainly use 24 volt. That way you're running one complete battery system. If you're doing a module or certainly trays on the back, a lot of our customers are fitting a 12 volt battery tray. So we do a 3-position battery tray. So then you have 12 and 24 volt, and we're using step down to charge.
So, but at the back of this vehicle, we've got a 70mm tow hitch, so tow up to 4.5 tonnes. Now, both the Isuzu and the Fuso are rated to 4.5 tonnes braked towing, but what, in your view, are the pros and the cons between the two for heavy-duty towing?
Certainly. So, for long-term towing, the Isuzu, we believe, is a better tow vehicle. It is built for towing, and towing with 4.5 tonne really, or up to 4.5 tonne, really is an issue for it. It's got a couple of advantages, being a 5.2 litre motor versus a 3 litre from the Fuso. The other thing is it does have an excellent exhaust brake. Now, being Brisbane based, coming down Cunningham's Gap in the Isuzu would be just using the exhaust brake the entire way down. With the Fuso, we would actually be touching the brakes to actually get it to the bottom. The exhaust brake is not quite as good. So certainly for long-term towing, the Isuzu does have its advantage. Also, we did have a customer who towed one of our vehicles around Australia with a very heavy van. Fuso was excellent, came to the party, but they did end up having issues with fifth gear, and the gearbox was replaced a couple of times.
Now, one of the things I found when I drive these trucks is they're just not as easy to get in and out of compared to, say, a Ranger. So you spend a lot of time hopping in and out of these two vehicles. Which is the easiest for you to get in and out of?
You do get used to it, and probably the hard part is your centre of balance. You're climbing for a seat here, but you're stepping here. As far as ease of access, I believe it's certainly easier to get into Isuzu. We do have to modify both of them to get the 37-inch tyres. So some of the modifications is shortening this front step here. So it traditionally comes back to here, so I've had to move it back. With the Fuso, we have put on an extra step just to make it a little bit easier inside. And on both of them, we have grab handles. With the Isuzu grab handle, it does come down to here, where the Fuso is around about there. So between that and this extra step here, I believe the Isuzu is certainly easier to get in and out of.
Now, if we wanted to take one of these on a long on-road drive, forget the off-road stuff, just eating up the kilometres day after day after day, which one would you want to grab the keys for?
Again, it depends if you're towing, and that's the big difference there. But let's talk about a vehicle that you're untowing, you're just driving around Australia, and both vehicles at 6 tonne. Certainly I prefer to drive the Fuso. It does use less fuel. You do have a warranty advantage as well. So we've got a 5-year, 200,000 kilometre warranty versus 3-year, 150,000. So you're covered for that little bit longer of time period for peace of mind. Drivability though, I still think the Fuso, if you're keeping it light, is the better vehicle. It's more car-like to drive, although you're still driving a truck. It is more car-like. Gear changes are a little bit easier, and it is more comfortable.
Okay, but we should stress that don't get out of a 300 series or 200 series or Ranger, get into one of these and expect it to ride and handle the same way, because it just won't.
That's correct. At the end of the day, it is still a truck. They have come a long way over the years of comfort-wise, upgrading seats, upgrading suspension. The tyres make the largest difference, even between the standard tyres going to a 35. It increases the comfort because of the sidewall. Going to a 37, it increases the comfort further, but at the end of the day, it is still a truck.
All right, so both these vehicles, the Isuzu and the Fuso, have got your GX camper module on them. Is there any difference between the two camper modules vehicle to vehicle?
There is some slight differences, particularly because the 12 and the 24 volt. The Isuzu runs the 24 volt, so we do step it down to 12, and there's a few electrical changes that we do there. So pretty well above this line here, they are almost identical. Below the line is where things change. So that's where we're holding our water and our fuel. The Isuzu does pick up a lot more water and a lot more fuel, just because of the shape of the chassis, and we can use the larger drop tanks. So the standard 140 litres versus the 100 that we've already discussed. But in the Fuso, we'll fit a 100 litre reserve tank, where the Isuzu has a 240 litre reserve tank. And of course the Fuso with 200 litres of water versus 290 in the Isuzu. So you do have more in every way with the Isuzu, more fuel, more water. That gives you a larger range, but the downside is you are carrying a little bit more weight for all those fluids.
Okay, but in terms of functionality and living space, it's identical.
Functionality and living space is identical. Because of the drop chassis, we can run the Fuso a little bit lower, so the module itself sits a little bit higher on the Isuzu.
Okay, I guess for manoeuvrability, sometimes every millimetre counts, because the Fuso is that tiny little bit smaller, lighter.
That's correct.
More manoeuvrable. That can sometimes play a bit of a difference, and also if it's not as tall.
That's correct. So certainly fitting under branches and side slopes, the Fuso does have the advantage there. The Isuzu, you can have the longer trips, and again, that exhaust brake does make a world of difference when travelling.
So let's take a look at the interior of both vehicles, starting with the Isuzu. Now, if you're going to be expecting Audi or Mercedes level of interior design and comfort, you're going to be shocked. It's more like a mid-90s Toyota Corolla, but it is basic and functional. You do have everything you need there to move a vehicle, even if the colour scheme is fairly boring. And there's a look into the back of the motorhome. Now, if we go into the motorhome itself, then that's what it looks like coming through the access panel. And again, you can see there just the basic instrumentation. There is aircon, there is electric windows, there is a glove box, and there is an interior, centre console storage where you can put a third seat, although you are going to need to get pretty comfortable for that. Here's another view, this time of the Canter. Climb back in, very similar to the Isuzu, colour scheme pretty much identical. Same sort of interior storage, a smaller head unit there. And let's also take a look into the back. There's the GX motorhome you can crawl through to as well. Now, coming through from the GX motorhome, Global Explorer motorhome to the front, same sort of thing there. The gear shift is in a slightly different position, but otherwise looking fairly similar to the Isuzu. So how to make these vehicles off-road ready, because as they come out of the factory, they're not really designed for the sort of off-roading that you probably have in mind. I've gone into this in more detail, but briefly here is what you need to do. Single rear wheels, the most important, and also increase in diameter from about 31, 32 inches to 35 or 37. Front flares to go over those wheels. Lifted suspension so you've got more clearance, not for load carrying, probably also make it more comfortable. Suspension seats, not for off-roading, but definitely helps. Cross-axle front lock locking differentials, really helps off-road, recommended. Kinetic subframe, so when the vehicle goes over uneven ground, whatever's on the back doesn't twist to pieces. Breathers to make sure that things like the diffs can vent to air and not ingest water, and various underbody guards, protection, roof racks and front and rear winches. Alright, so let's talk about the specification differences between the two vehicles then. So fundamentally they're fairly similar, but there are some significant differences. So the Fuso is less powerful than the Isuzu, but it's also lighter. We'll come on to that in a second. Transmission's a big one. 5-speed manual is the only option for the Canter. You can spend 30k and get a 6-speed Allison automatic. If you want an AMT, automated manual transmission, that will only cost you $3,400 extra, and that's part of the Isuzu package. Both have exhaust brakes, but as discussed, the Isuzu's better. It sort of shows you can't always just look at the spec sheet and go, oh, tick it, it's got something. Suspension, live axles front and rear the same. Fuel consumption not stated because it's a truck, they don't need to. The Isuzu does use a little bit more though, being heavier, having a bigger engine. 140 litres standard, so it will take you further because the fuel consumption difference isn't 40%. Now the dimensions, what we find here is that the Isuzu is slightly larger, if not actually any taller. And another difference is that the Canter's got a 5-year warranty, 200,000 kilometres, whereas only 3 years, 150 on the Isuzu. Both of them got a 30,000 kilometre service interval. You can pause that to read those statistics in more detail. Now weight, this is again where we find a difference. Despite the fact that the dimensions are very similar, the Isuzu is significantly heavier, reflecting its heavier duty purposes. So it's about 340 kilograms heavier than the Canter, and it's got a GVM of 1,000 kilograms more, which means that it's got significantly more payload by over 600 kilograms, and that's for the single cabs here. The dual cabs, I've put the numbers there as well. Brake tow 4,500 again, per the recommendation, heavy towing, and that's 3 tons plus. You really want to be doing that with the Isuzu, particularly if your Canter is loaded, and GCM a difference as well. If you want to know what all those numbers mean, GCM, GVM, etc., I do have a towing weights calculator and a lot of videos explaining how they all work, so I won't go into that now. Safety, this is a very short slide because of course they are trucks and you're not going to get the whole range of safety equipment that you would find on a passenger vehicle. So both of them have got ABS. EBD is on the Canter, which is electronic brake distribution, which is ensuring that each wheel is braked to its maximum, whereas ABS just stops a wheel locking. So that's an advantage to the Canter. Airbags, driver and passenger, no side airbags. Stability control, no for both, but it is on the Canter 4x2 models, but we're talking here 4x4. Now off-road, front locker, is said optional aftermarket, you should tick that. Good LSD, limited slip differential on the rear. Both got low range, and the Canter wins with a slightly better reduction. Both part-time four-wheel drive with locking hubs, and both of them can be, you can add the same set of off-road modifications to them. Other stuff which didn't kind of fit, the Canter has no cruise control. The Isuzu does have cruise control. The head unit is better on the Isuzu, so that's a bonus. We talked about electrics. Yes, they've both got aircon standard. You can derate both of them pre-registration to drive on a car license. That's a GVM of under 4,500 kilograms, but if you do that you'll significantly reduce your payload, particularly in the Isuzu, which is heavy to begin with. So consider the pros and cons of that. Both of them got central locking, etc., and cost 19,000 difference, and that's for the base vehicle. It's not including the motorhome or any tray or anything on the back, just the base vehicle modified with super singles, etc. Now I've covered the Fuso versus Isuzu because that's the most popular. There's also the Hino equivalent as well, which I haven't gone into in this video. There's the daily 4x4, the old version with the live axles front and rear. That's designed as an off-roader. A lot of people enjoy that vehicle, but it does have some reliability concerns and a poor reputation. The Ocker, Australian built vehicle, again purpose designed off-roader there. You don't need to modify either of those with super singles. They've already got single rear wheels. Stepping up a size, you've got the Unimog as well. That's really an extra dimension in cost and size, and arguably too big for many Australian tracks. And the Gaz Trackmaster from AAV, which is a bigger vehicle again. And of course you could do things like tow or go for a 6-wheel conversion.
But what you're telling me is that the Fuso is cheaper by about $15,000. It's a little bit lighter, both physically, and it also a slightly lighter duty vehicle, a little bit smaller in dimensions as well, whereas the Isuzu is slightly larger, heavier duty, better for towing, and that's really the way you'd make your decision. Your heavy towers want to carry extra weight, you go the Isuzu, otherwise you probably save the money and go for the Canter. Is that a fair summary?
That's a fair summary. I guess it all depends on what you're looking for in a vehicle. If you're on a budget, and I don't necessarily mean price, but happy to pay a little bit less, but also carry less out on the road, not take everything including kitchen sink, the Fuso is a great vehicle and it will serve you for many years to come, particularly under the longer warranty. The Isuzu, it's a heavier vehicle. It allows you to take a lot more gear. It is built stronger. For instance, if you're giving it to your work boys, take the Isuzu. It will take a hell of a beating.
Great, well thanks a lot, Brett. Hope you found this video useful. If you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments, and thank you for watching.